Hello everyone, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone is having a fantastic weekend. I hope that you're having a fantastic night. I am glad to see everyone's back here once again for yet another stream. Now, obviously, a lot of stuff has been happening throughout the world, but a lot of this stuff, generally speaking, isn't really good, though. A lot of this stuff is just kind of, well, it's kind of bad. It's just bad. War, death, famine, drought, disease, you name it. The four horsemen of the apocalypse is essentially ravaging the earth right now. But luckily, there's a little bit of stuff that we can do to help. The fact is that we are able to help the world through charities and fundraisers and kindness, really. Trust me, there's many points in this lifetime where I would not have been able to make it up until where I have now without the kindness of strangers. And that is certainly true for a lot of people throughout the world. A lot of people who rely on humanitarian aid. 47 million people is what the World Food Program expects to have been affected just by the war in Ukraine alone. The Ukrainian grain crisis, as a result, has caused, according to the World Food Program, 47 million people to be affected in total. 47 million acts of collateral hunger in one single geopolitical situation. And that doesn't even include other conflicts that are ongoing in places such as Africa and the Middle East. And so, with that, let's all take a second to check out the video description below. And you're going to see a ton of organizations. And you're going to see a ton of different charities and fundraisers that we have listed for you. 80% or more of all of these go to directly to the program. 80% of all of their donations they receive go directly to the program, I should say. And we have so many that we can't physically list a description with them anymore. We used to, if you go back to earlier streams, we used to be able to actually list them, which is an amazing milestone, and that's something that we want to have happen. We want to fill up all 5,000 characters with nothing but links regarding different organizations and charities we can give to, and we have even more, or we have more on the website too, that you guys can go and check out, as well as on the Discord. Anything listed in the description also makes it on there. But we are never doing super chats on the channel. We're never doing any kind of merchandising. 100% of everything we do is going to these charities, and we want to be able to put them directly onto the stream as well at some point in the near future. So I hope that you guys will help continue to support us in that endeavor, and especially support these organizations. If you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's perfectly okay. You can go ahead and honestly just give us a like and subscribe. It does wonders for the algorithms when it comes to YouTube. The more people that see this overall, then the more people that join in on the community, and the more good we can do as a community throughout the world. And I implore you, do not just check out the stuff for Ukraine, but check out places that may be affected by the collateral hunger as a result of Ukraine. I'm talking places like Somalia, Ethiopia, and Southeast Asia, places that already were struggling with food and water shortages, and now they're struggling with other things too, to an even greater degree. And what humanitarian aid they were getting was, for the most part, slashed in half. So please be sure to give them your attention, even though the spotlight may not be on them at this point in time. It is still a really big deal to us. And if you have an organization, or you know of one that we don't have added to this list, jump on our Discord. The link's also in the description for that, and let a staff member know. Send us a link and send us a short summary of these, and we want to go through and we want to vet each individual one independently. So send it to a staff member. We'll get that vetting process started, and hopefully it will end up here on the stream, on the website, on Discord, and everywhere else that we're active. So thank you so much for the support you've already given us. Thank you so much for the support you've given to those organizations. That's really the goal of this whole project, and hopefully we'll be able to continue doing that into the far future. But without further ado, we're going to jump right into the main bit of news here, which is what's going inside of Ukraine. We have a couple of different things, but we actually start off over here in Lviv, where Ukrainian security forces have tracked down some fraudsters. The SBU, they tracked them down. These individuals were taking shipments that they were receiving, and they were basically cutting a little bit off the top. The thing to understand is that there's still an immense amount of corruption, oligarchy, and stuff inside of Ukraine. The difference between them and, say, Georgia, which was rejected as an EU candidate, is the fact that Ukraine's actually made a lot of strides. It's much better than it used to be. And they're actively trying to crack down on it and continuing to make reforms. So that's the difference. Whereas Georgia is still a very long way in their process. They have a very long way to go. There's still a lot of corruption and oligarchies within Georgia. And so those reforms just haven't come through like they have here in Ukraine. We see these very actions of trying to cut down and crack down on on the corruption. $220,000 or 8 million. I do not know what the Ukrainian currency is, but it's worth 8 million in their currency. But $220,000 worth of bulletproof vests, ammunition, and equipment that has been basically skimmed off the top and was trying to be sold onto the black market. The SBU did track these individuals down, tracked down their entire circle, got into their warehouse, and we do see the result of this here. So we take a look here, just vast shipments, and all this has been turned over to the armed forces. So that way they will be able to actually put them back into service. And here's the official statement regarding it coming from the SBU. As you can see, they're pulling out these ceramic plates. I mean, shipments of this stuff. So, very good to see. Very good to see that they continue to crack down. I'm never going to say that there aren't problems with Ukraine. There's always problems with every country, some countries more than others. But that's currently what's going down over in Lviv. And apparently the Ukrainian currency is the Ukrainian hryvnia. I'm sorry if I butchered that, but that's very interesting. It's worth just under 3 cents in the United States. Interesting. That's kind of cool. I do keep a personal collection. I actually collect foreign currency, so I didn't know that, but I have all sorts. I have all sorts of stuff. I got Argentinian dollars, Thailand. I got a lot of yen, Hong Kong dollars, which they don't make anymore. But yeah, that's just a little personal tidbit here. As we continue down here, this is actually in Russia, believe it or not, so we're going to skip that for now. But we're going to jump down here into the Kharkiv Oblast, where we see more rockets have hit the Kharkiv Oblast. Unfortunately, this is pretty much a daily occurrence. This one's actually an update regarding yesterday. When it comes to official statements, what you're really seeing is stuff, 24 hours and afterwards, when it comes to official statements regarding these events. So keep in mind there is usually a delay. Some of that's for OPSEC. Some of that is just because someone's got to write the official statements and actually say it. But what we see here is, quote, rocket attacks on the city of Kharkiv and the Chuhiv, Izium, Borodukiv, and Kharkiv districts in the Kharkiv region. On July 22nd, 5 citizens were injured and 1 was killed. Local residential buildings and outbuildings were damaged. Several fires occurred. And that's coming from Oleh Subanov, who's the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration. Now, some of these areas, they make sense why they're getting hit. You talk about the area around Izium, and you're talking about areas along the front lines here. Yeah, those are going to receive some shelling. That's kind of expected. That's pretty much what we see throughout the entire front line. Kharkiv and other locations that are further away from the front lines in areas that are no longer capable of being struck by Russian artillery, there really isn't too much of a point in doing so. Kharkiv really isn't strategically or tactically viable for Russia anymore as an objective. And so they have to be hit. Kharkiv has to be hit with things like Iskander and missile systems, which are being fired from the city of Belgorod. And we see that, multiple times a day, reportedly 6 to 8 missiles per morning. And sometimes they have follow-on barrages throughout the day and later on at night. But other locations, such as Chuhiv, much closer down here, they also have their own international airport, which obviously could be used for military operations there. You're also talking about Izium, which is along an axis of advance. We've seen significant amounts of artillery usage within this area and have very heavy fighting, especially prior to Severodonetsk and Lysychansk being taken. We saw an immense amount of fighting early on in the Donbass offensive here in the Izium Oblast. That starts bringing us down here into Donetsk and the Luhansk Oblast, and we start to get some more information. The first thing is we have the daily update regarding what has happened in the Donetsk Oblast over the last 24 hours, 48 hours. And quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the Donetsk region on July 22nd. 9 citizens were injured. And that's coming from Pavlo Kirilenko, who is the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. So we had some dead yesterday. Today, luckily, no one seems to have been killed, but it seems that there were, in fact, injuries amongst 9 citizens. I do hope for a swift recovery for them. But the big news coming out today for in favor of Ukraine is actually just across the border here and just across the front line in Horlivka. Horlivka was hit today with Ukrainian artillery, which detonated a massive ammunition stockpile that they had right here on the front lines. Not an exactly smart thing to do considering the amount of destroyed ammunition depots we've been seeing. But we saw the stockpile once again destroyed here today, and we can take a look at some of that. Once again, from my understanding, I believe that my lovely OBS here seems to have wanted to no longer have audio. No, it does. I apologize for that. But, regardless, we continue to move on. That was it for Horlivka. Once again, we don't know if this was HIMARS that struck this or if this was M270s, but they did successfully destroy another ammunition depot here. Is pretty obvious considering a massive blast that occurred there. Congratulations, you guys also got to see a little bit behind the scenes. But it's nothing crazy. It's OBS, guys. But that's currently the situation there. But there's also another really big but really interesting development in Donetsk. And that is the fact that Donetsk was shelled with thermite. We're pretty confident at this point it's not white phosphorus. What they use, we believe it's thermite. Thermite is another type of incendiary that is used pretty heavily. But it's used most of the time inside of a form of a grenade. I got trained how to use a thermite grenade. It has a much shorter fuse than normal grenades do, but you can pop a thermite grenade and you can drop it on the engine block of like a vehicle or whatever, and it'll burn right through the. It'll actually burn right through the vehicle, the whole engine block. What we see here is thermite is being air bursted, and the thing about this is we're pretty sure the Russians did this. Not only are we pretty sure the Russians did this, we're confident enough to say that I would guarantee that this is probably almost a false flag incident. Now, where this occurs is actually over here, and it actually looks over. You can see a lot of this footage. The initial footage we got was actually him. They were looking across the river, so we're seeing basically incoming artillery rounds of thermite coming from the northeast, which would put it kind of in this area, being fired and popping over Donetsk. I don't know if this is purposeful, but considering how much there is, it would appear so. But you can take a look at this now. And so we see more thermite, obviously, here. We got some really good photos of it coming in. And that's much closer than we've seen before when it comes to thermite. But you can see here, this is looking out over the river here. And this is, and based off of the kind of the direction this stuff is going, we can kind of tell it's coming out of the northeast. Based off of where the observer is, and based off of where the footage is coming from. So we can go ahead and go with that. But pretty significant development here, and this could be accidental. I don't think so. Now, there's been a lot of stuff regarding Donetsk and controversy and stuff that's been questionable before done by Ukrainian forces. Prior to them getting HIMARS, we did see where grads were hitting this. We couldn't tell which side was doing this. It could have very well been the Ukrainians hitting Donetsk with grad systems. But evidence pretty much shows on the contrary of Ukrainians doing this. This also breaks the rhetoric regarding the genocide of Russian-speaking people, essentially. And the reason we say this is because you just have to look at the damage done since 2014. Now, Google My Maps by no means is, which is what I use in order to set up the map every day, is by no means, real-time footage, as you can tell by the developments and the zooming in on a lot of stuff here. What it does do, though, is it does have developments from stuff during the war prior to the invasion, which means that everything 2014 onward, and between 2014 and February, is pretty much accurate to detail. And what we see is, when we're talking about Donetsk was, you're talking about major trench warfare, just, not too far outside the city, and the lines have very much been stalemated since. And the destruction is really limited to military targets. If we take a look here at Donetsk Airport, this is the Donetsk Airport. You can tell, obviously, it's been shelled, but an airport's also a legitimate military target. And we can see some damage around the airport. This housing block here, obviously, didn't fare too well. But we also know what kind of systems they're using. They're using the GRAD systems. Obviously, not the most accurate, but you're also living right next to the international airport, which is a target. I expect there to be collateral damage to some extent in a war zone. War is unfortunately a tragedy for a civilian population. Civilians are going to die, and there will be collateral damage. That is a tragedy. Okay, this housing block is a tragedy. The few houses we have over here, some of which are destroyed, also a tragedy. Is this mean that they're purposely shelling all of Donetsk? No, because if you look here, you got some damage within here. This is a big factory complex, so that's a military target. But I don't look across, and then you look across the street, perfectly okay. It's fine. We can see this on this image. If I go downtown Donetsk, same thing. There's no damage whatsoever. Even this complex, it's perfectly okay. Nothing's wrong with this. And there's definitely legitimate military targets in downtown. There's definitely factories and stuff in downtown Donetsk that would be constituted as a legitimate military target. But you don't see that destruction, and that one breaks the rhetoric of the genocide of Russian-speaking people in the Donbass, and that is one of the major justifications for the war. We see very minimal damage in other locations. You can still tell, there's obviously destruction in other outlying regions, but, Donetsk State Factory of Chemical Products, yeah, that's a target. The airport, that's a target. Major factories, yeah, those are targets. Residential complexes, yeah, wow, look at that. It's all nice and green and everything is looking good, You even got yourself some nice rail lines in there. Everything's fine. It's all hunky-dory. So we do know that even prior to the war beginning in 2014, just by looking at this, we know that there was discrimination of fires. We know that Ukrainian forces, when engaging the separatists, even before the war began, that they were very discriminatory in the types of fires they were conducting. They were hitting only military targets, relatively. They're hitting only military targets with minimized collateral damage to civilian population. The destruction is evident from that. If we were talking about the genocide of these people, we would have just seen grads leveling entire city blocks of Donetsk, and it would have been over the last 8 years. So it would have looked like Mariupol times 1,000. And we don't see that whatsoever. So we also know that Ukraine hasn't employed thermite at this point in the war. We haven't seen them employ any kind of incendiary munitions. So we have seen the Russians do it. So that's very telling in multiple factors of we know that even prior to the invasion, they were very discriminatory about their fires. We know that when they have hit things within Donetsk where they were setting up ammunition depots and everything else, we know that they've used the M777s with Excalibur rounds, which means that they're precision guided. We know that they've used HIMARS. So they're still being very discriminatory during the course of the war. We have only 2 instances in which case that isn't necessarily true, and that would be this instance, which, if it was fired by Ukraine, would be the first time we can verify that Ukraine has used incendiary munitions, or the other time, which is still up in the air, is when grads were being used against Donetsk, and we can either throw that up between the Russians or the Ukrainians. Both have been controversial. Both have been claimed on opposing sides of either being the Russians shooting at their own people in order to blame the Ukrainians, or the Ukrainians shooting things at Donetsk and saying it was the Russians. So there's no clarification on either side. This time, though, we can tell based off of where the viewer is that these shells most likely came in from the northeast, which would put it in Russian-controlled territory, meaning the Russians would have had to have done this against their own people. I will going to bet and say that tomorrow or in the next 48 hours, we're going to see a statement coming from the Russian Federation regarding this, and it's probably going to be talking about the use of thermite or incendiary munitions against a highly concentrated civilian population, which breaks international law and the Geneva Conventions on the side of Ukraine. And I'm sure that's probably the statement that will come out, probably from Lavrov himself or from the spokesman of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. However, I don't see any evidence to support that. As we come over here to Zaporizhia, we see that more internment of civilians continues, and that is where basically Ukrainian citizens are being taken. They're being put inside of these filtration camps. Here in the Zaporizhia Oblast alone, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian aggressors have kidnapped 415 Ukrainian citizens in the Zaporizhia region. More than 170 Ukrainians are still being held in captivity. And that's coming from the press service of the Zaporizhia Regional Military Administration. But as we jump over here into Kherson, we start to see several different developments happening. We saw, of course, the Antonovsky Bridge, which was hit by Ukrainian artillery and effectively put out of action, at least momentarily. But we've also seen several other things occur as well. First of all, there are more destroyed depots here. According to the Ukrainian Armed Forces Southern Command, the Armed Forces of Ukraine destroyed 2 military team sites and a Russian ammunition depot in Kherson in the Mykolaiv regions on July 22nd. But they also hit another bridge. And I mean insane, absolute precision. When I say the HIMARS can hit within 1 meter of its designated target, I mean it. And we see that happen as this entire bridge has been cratered. It's been cratered. We can take a look at some of this here. I don't know if you can tell, but those are almost perfectly spaced apart. And what that tells us is this is probably a HIMARS strike, and man, is it effective. And we can see that this damage, it went straight through the bridge. We're not talking about collapsing a bridge here. Collapsing a bridge, about the one thing that we as human beings are better than killing each other, is making bridges, truthfully. Bridges and arches, we're fantastic at those. I they will last for millennia. There are thousands of examples across the globe where bridges have lasted the test of time. And we see that here, where Ukraine's not trying to destroy the bridge and collapse a segment of it. Realistically, you would need a ton of TNT for that, and it's just not going to happen here. But what they are trying to do is they need to make it no longer structurally sound, and no longer structurally sound enough to transport heavy cargo over it, meaning tanks can't cross it. You're talking about heavy laden logistical vehicles wouldn't be able to cross it, so their Urals wouldn't be able to cross it, their Kamaz trucks wouldn't be able to cross it. And that means you're lacking supplies heading to the front, you're lacking equipment heading to the front, because otherwise you put this bridge at risk of collapse. And that's kind of what we see with the Antonovsky Bridge, and now we see that here. Take a look. So it's kind of my understanding that this is still not working properly. Let's see if this one will work. Alrighty, but I apologize for the problems tonight, guys. I do not understand why OBS doesn't like to save my settings when it comes to... I mean, it'll save everything else when it comes to the stream. It just doesn't save the actual audio settings, which is really frustrating, to say the least, especially when I'm trying to actually do this every night. But anyway, we jump over here into the rest of the Kherson Oblast, where we have a couple of developments. But the first one is out of Kherson, and this, I mean, who didn't see this one coming? Who didn't? There's nobody on the face of the earth that didn't see this coming. According to the Russian state-run media channel TASS, the occupational government of Kherson has created a referendum committee in order to begin the process of joining the Russian Federation. Wow. Wow. How, who would have thunk it? I mean, come on. Who would have thought this was going to happen? Right? We just didn't see it coming whatsoever. And you think I'm kidding? Here's TASS. Here's their article. Yes. Yes. So, this basically justifies everyone's claims of, yeah, actually the Russians are just going to occupy this place. They said for the longest time, we're not going to occupy Ukraine, we're just trying to kick out the neo-Nazi government, which is crazy considering it would be a neo-Nazi government led by a descendant of Holocaust survivors and a Jewish man. They also called Israel Nazis, by the way, in case anyone wants to try and figure that one out. But to break through the cobwebs of that, yeah, so they said we aren't going to occupy it. We're trying to get rid of neo-Nazis. And yet here they are. They're setting the occupational government, which is partially civilian, partially military, of course, is setting up a committee for a referendum to join the Russian Federation. We saw this in Crimea. I'm sure we are going to see this in Donetsk and Luhansk. I mean, come on. Seriously? Let's go see what TASS has to say about this. Man, this is going to be interesting to read. A 7-member election committee to conduct a referendum on a ceding to Russia is being created in Kherson. Yeah, quote, according to the July 22nd, 2022 decree by the head of the Kherson region's military civilian administration, an election committee of the Kherson region is being created numbering 7 members with a 3-year term of tenure, and nominations are being accepted. The press service stressed that the residents of the liberated Kherson region have the right to express their opinion on the future of the region. According to the global practice, the Kherson region will establish through this through elections and referendums. Oh, look at this. On Saturday, head of the Zaporizhzhia region's military civilian administration, I'm not going to try and pronounce that name, also signed a decree on the creation of election committee to conduct a referendum on joining Russia. Wow. So we got 2. So we got 2 now, not just the one. I wish I would have read into this further. But this is just a war. This is just a war of, it's just think of every war that happened in the 20th century. Essentially, like, think of every major conflict of the 20th century. What is it about? Reunification, or it's about gaining land and gaining, war materials, or gaining the supplies, or gaining natural resource, whatever. Like, that's all it's about. Like, Korea, reunification of North and South Vietnam. That's what the Korean War is about. That's the North invading the South in order to reunify. The Vietnam War, the same thing. Northern Vietnam wants to take over Southern Vietnam. Reunification of the country. One half's democratic, one half is, well, I say democratic. One side is Western backed, one side is communist. Same thing with North Korea. World War II, it's the expansion of a power. Nazi Germany, it's the expansion of powers. Nazi Germany, basically the entire Axis powers there, and taking over colonies and taking over, most of the Pacific in order to continue fighting China. At least for the Japanese, Lebensraum for the Nazi Germany, and then you're talking about World War I, the expansion of the Kaiserreich. You're talking about also with World War II the expansion of the Soviet Union, which occurred there. In case you didn't, pick up that one for the last 80 years of history, and then the collapse of the Russian Empire. I mean, just think, like. It's the same thing that has happened throughout the entire 20th century. This is why everyone was afraid of the Reds. The Red Scare and the second Red Scare. The first one in the 40s and the second one in the 60s. This is when the Soviet Union kept saying they were going to take over everybody. Like, everyone was terrified of Soviet spies and Soviet war, and going to war with the Soviets and nuclear Armageddon. Like, that's what everyone was afraid of. And now all of a sudden Russia's doing it, and they're surprised that that everyone's on Ukraine's side. Like, yeah, well, what did you say for the last, 80 years of existence? You said you were going to take over everybody. You collapsed, and now you're going to take over everybody. Like, nothing has changed in 100 years. Nothing has changed since 1917. Essentially, is what this means. That's all. Nothing. Like, this is all. Like, you're just trying to take over more land for yourself to become more Russia. You just are running out of Russia, I guess, which is crazy considering you have the entirety of Siberia, which these people barely can feed themselves. There's nobody out there. You're already the largest country in the world based off of landmass alone. You span 2 continents. Do we really need to expand Russia? What does Russian power do here? That also just puts your borders closer with NATO, which already is doubling right now as the ascension of Finland continues. Come on. So, basically, everything that has ever been said on the Russian side, we can pretty much debunk it immediately. Just any justifications for war given by the Russians, it might as well just be ignored as even having been said. And coming out of Kherson as well. Russian missiles were spotted being launched outside of Kherson very early this morning, and we do have a photo of that. And guess where these missiles were destined? Of course, it was the highly populated city of Mykolaiv. Take a look. And then we jump over here to Mykolaiv, where we see the results of the damage. And so this is probably because of the frustration and the Southern commanders. War crimes are generally perpetrated because of frustration. That's pretty much a universal. There's not really a whole lot of other reasons that you would see, at least uniformed militaries conducting war crimes. I mean, terrorists didn't sign the Geneva Convention, but they also are war criminals just inherently. But really, when you're talking about large-scale amounts of war crimes and stuff like that, you're talking about frustrations. You're really talking about the, feeling that you're hitting your head against a brick wall over and over again. That's pretty much what every Russian commander feels like right now as he watches his entire military unit be absolutely demolished by Ukrainian troops, or not even within sight of Ukrainian troops. They're probably just HIMARS blowing him to bits. And you see this over and over and over again. People, you're getting demoralized, you're getting frustrated, you're not making any gains, and you see stuff like this. Why do you shell Mykolaiv? Well, I mean, there are some objectives that I could see why you would shell Mykolaiv. Same thing with Kharkiv. There's a couple things. There might be a command post in Kharkiv, but I wouldn't, same thing with Mykolaiv. They would have bombed every military command post in Mykolaiv at this point if that's what they were shooting for. We know it's not, because we also watched them bomb the cemetery, because not even the dead seem to be able to see the end of war here. And that's kind of what we see once again. Quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the city of Mykolaiv on July 23rd. A local residential building was destroyed and people are under the rubble. A 16-year-old girl was injured. The rescue operation is ongoing. And that's coming from Hanna Zamazieva, the head of the Mykolaiv Regional Council. And we can see some of the destruction here from where those missiles were landing. And that brings us over to the big news story of the day, and that's here in Odessa. It took 19 hours. 19 hours. Russia, Ukraine, and Turkey, and the United Nations, all just signed an agreement regarding grain exports. One of the final closing lines of the agreement was no ship and no port facility is to be attacked by either side. 19 hours later, after this agreement has been signed, Russian missiles, Caliber cruise missiles fired from the Black Sea Fleet, impacted here at the port of Odessa. Specifically, they hit the dry docks, which is located right here. If you can take a look at these, these are dry docks that are located here at the Port of Mariupol, less than 500 meters away from the actual grain loading facilities. And so, once again, the Port of Mariupol has been attacked, which already brings into question if Russia is actually going to uphold this deal. We're going to guess and say probably not, considering they've already broken it, technically. So, the ink had just dried on the document before they fired these, essentially. And we can see the destruction here. Now, there were more missiles inbound, but several of them were destroyed midair, meaning that more targets were meant to be hit than just the dry docks. And so we can see here where the destruction has been, or where we can see the impact offshore. But I mean, it just keeps going. I mean, here's some of the Here's some of the first responders, the firefighters here trying to put out the blaze. And I mean, this was supposed to be over. Here is the statement from Secretary Blinken, who is the Secretary of State, and this is coming from today. The United States strongly condemns the Russian missile attack against Odessa. The United States on the Ukrainian port of Odessa today, just 24 hours after finalizing a deal to allow the resumption of Ukrainian agricultural exports through the Black Sea. Russia breached its commitments by attacking the historic port from which grain and agricultural exports would again be transported under this arrangement. The Kremlin continues to show disregard for the safety and security of millions of civilians as it perpetrates its assault on Ukraine. Russia is starving Ukraine and its economic vitality and the world of its food supply through an effective blockade of the Black Sea. The attack casts serious doubt on the credibility of Russia's commitment to yesterday's deal and undermines the work of the UN, Turkey, and Ukraine to get critical food to world markets. Russia bears responsibility for deepening the global food crisis and must stop its aggression and fully implement the deal which it has agreed. Yeah, so Xenocide21 says, yeah, go ahead, quote, yeah, go ahead and export some grain. It'll be fine. Fingers crossed. Behind the scenes, it's thanks for telling us where you plan to be tomorrow. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, it's... Once again, I've talked about this. I've talked about this to a pretty good extent. We follow Russian social media channels. Like I check the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Kremlin and everybody to see if they had any statements on what has happened. They didn't. They're probably writing one right now. There's probably about 50 writers sitting in a room. Probably some wonderful KGB guys sitting next to them, because I'm pretty sure, they say they don't have it, but I'm sure, the equivalent of the KGB is currently sitting in the room behind them. Makarov's on the hip, willing to execute anyone who doesn't write the words that they want to hear. And that's the situation with Russia. I mean, they don't have any independent news channels. You can't say war. You can't protest the war. You can't do anything. You get arrested, thrown in jail. It doesn't matter who you are. All of the media channels are state run. They are not independent news media. The fact that you have Taz and RIA and RT and all these networks, IZ I think is the other one, is the illusion of choice. It's the same thing, it's just somebody else is saying it. And it's so terrible. In fact, if you go and you listen to all of them at the same time, people have made wonderful compilations of this. If you go and listen to them all at the same time, they're basically saying almost the exact same words in unison. And that's the thing. It's an authoritarian dictatorship now. It's the illusion of choice. You have the illusion of the Duma. You have the illusion of all of these news channels. And you can't trust what's being said. About the only thing you can trust is when it's something that you really can't, go and be like, okay, like justifications for war. There is no justification for NATO expansion. NATO never agreed to not expand. Like, never. They said that they would never put forces past West Germany, and they made that agreement with the Soviet Union, a nation which collapsed. Right? The Soviet bloc doesn't exist anymore. NATO has continued to expand with an open door policy. That's been widely known by everybody for the last, for the most part, a century since the creation of NATO. 60 years, 70 years now. And there was no genocide. Like, there's no genocide happening. They took over Crimea with they had them uniformed, but they didn't have them identified as Russian forces. Same thing in the Donbass. you've blockaded the Black Sea, saying it's not a blockade. We know it's a blockade. They built up these forces for months. I think everyone forgets the fact that the United States said that Russia was going to do this in like October or September, like, of last year. Like, everyone knew what was going to happen. They were like, no, we're just doing military exercises. And then they went into Belarus, and they're like, no, we're just conducting military exercises with our partner in Belarus, right here on the border, and then they have all of these troops staged, and then they bring in the Black Sea Fleet, and they're like, no, we're going to conduct military, we're going to conduct, this, what is it? We're going to conduct, training in the Black Sea. And then they brought in, and then all of a sudden they announced, we're going to send Russian peacekeepers to the Donbass. First of all, peacekeepers are sent by the United Nations, not an individual nation. I think everyone needs to understand how that works. The United Nations Security Council makes a resolution, and then that resolution is passed with the UN Security Council, and the parameters are set, and then they get a multinational force of peacekeepers and then send them to the area they will be peacekeeping. Not the nation of Russia goes and says, we're going to send peacekeepers here. That's not how that works on any level at all, whatsoever. And then, after all of this, and after months of everyone going, they're going to invade Ukraine. They're going to invade Ukraine. They invade Ukraine, and they do it during the National Security Council meeting. They declare war, they declare a special military operation inside of Ukraine during the Security Council meeting about them not invading the country of Ukraine. I watched it live. I sat there for like 2 hours listening to all of these speeches, and the Irish delegation on the UN Security Council at the time said, we're very close to the, we're so close, and we're staring into this black abyss, which could be the war. And then all of a sudden, the Ukrainian ambassador is just calm this entire time, by the way. And he's like, well, all of this is useless now. You declared a war on my country, 10 minutes ago. And, it was... I mean, there is no, justifications for any of this. There is no genocide. There's just not a genocide. It's terrible. It's a tragedy. There's separatist forces fighting. They're backed by the Russian Federation. They're talking about, taking away Latvia's independence charter. The Soviet Union's gone. They don't have an independence charter. They're just an independent nation. Ukraine's just a sovereign nation. There is no lesser or more sovereign of a nation, except maybe Belarus, because Belarus is literally part of a union with Russia. And it's also under a dictatorship. So, no, I don't expect them to uphold commitments about the grain. Because I don't expect them to not bomb their own people, as we see with Donetsk. With get this, hitting a civilian population with thermite or any kind of incendiary munition breaks the third protocol of the Geneva Convention. It also breaks customary international humanitarian law. But it doesn't matter, because we saw it already with Mariupol. We saw it already with Popasna. We see it already everywhere across the front. There is no law to contain Russia. There is no international law. I don't think there hasn't been an international law they haven't broken in some capacity. They're pillaging. They're conducting reprisals. They're using incendiary munitions against people. They're using cluster munitions. They're not planning precision strikes. They're just conducting massive bombardments. They are forcefully deporting people. They are interning people forcefully into concentration camps, essentially, because that's what the filtration camps system is, and we've known that since the 90s during the Chechen War. They are There's mass rape. There's mass murder. We just watched yesterday where the guy in Luhansk region was just executed by a commander. Which, the only thing we don't have more telling of a sign than the dead guy that we watched here on the stream is the fact that we don't have a photograph like what came out of the Vietnam War when a South Vietnamese commander just executed a suspected Viet Cong fighter. Like, that photo is extremely famous. It's one of the most famous photos of the entire war. It wasn't even American, by the way. It was a South Vietnamese commander who did that, South Vietnamese police chief. And it's crazy just what's happened. I mean, torture, rape, murder, mass destruction of civilian populations, total disregard for individual safety. There is nothing that hasn't been done. Putting military objectives inside civilian populations. Most importantly, most egregiously, I should say, ammunition depots, which, if hit, will kill a lot of people. And now they're going to try and annex it. I don't listen. We watch the Russian media for certain things. But all of their rhetoric is so easily debunkable. Biolabs. I mean, god damn. Biolabs. I hate the biolabs argument. Yeah. I mean, we've seen videos of Russian soldiers just executing civilians in places like Bucha and Irpin and Hostomel. We have satellite images of mass graves from Mariupol. I mean, what more evidence do you need? There is no, international law or anything that Russia... There is no treaty or international law or anything that Russia isn't going to break. The ink hadn't dried on the page and they bombed the port of Odessa. I mean, the ink hadn't even dried yet, and they already had it. They already had that plan going into action. It's so aggravating. It's absolutely frustrating. It's so hard to read through Russian media channels and listen to Russian statements and to read through their laws, because I have their database regarding all of their laws, and it's frustrating. I hate reading through it every night when doing this research. Yes, demise FPS. Biolabs by the Umbrella Corporation. Yes, they're going to we're going to unleash the T virus, the C virus, the G virus, the T Veronica virus. Yeah, we're going to unleash it all. Ouroboros, Las Plagas, Las Grandes. We're going to just unleash it all straight from Ukraine. We're just keeping all of these pathogens for just no apparent reason. We read their statements coming from the Ministry of Defense for Russia. We read about this, and we're just yeah, of course they would have that pathogen there. So that way they were talking about they had the Ebola. They have live Ebola in that they had found inside of a, biolab in Ukraine or whatever. We're and what was the statement regarding it? The paperwork that they had, taken, and then they had photocopied and they put it on there and they highlighted it and they said, yeah, it's for what was that? The discovery, to improve upon discovering it. So that way you could, treat it better and prevent the spread of Ebola across Europe, which has ravaged the entire continent of Africa, and killed a ton of people. Yeah, we probably don't want that in Europe where there's a shit ton of public transit. That's probably a terrible idea. That's like a pandemic just waiting to happen. Let's not have that happen. And how do you do that? You study it. Crazy fact, I know. That doesn't constitute a biolab. There's a biolab in every hospital, including the one sitting in Moscow right now. Well, maybe, if they have the funding. I highly doubt it. We've seen Russian hospitals. They ain't all that great. And then Aravish Chang says, perhaps there should be some national law regarding misinfo. So when Russia is spreading fake news, then other nations should just shut it down. Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I don't believe in that because I think that hearing all sides is important, because I wouldn't be able to report on stupid stuff like that if I wasn't able to access it, right? I've reported on state-run media stuff from North Korea. North Korea is the most isolated country on the planet as a nation. And We reported on stuff from North Korea, their state-run media, and if you don't listen to it, and you don't hear what's being said, and you don't look at the whole scenario, then that's when you have a problem. If you're pro-Russian, and you're watching this, because YouTube's not blocked in Russia, by the way. If you're pro-Russian and you're watching this, I want you to take a look at the whole scenario. And I want you to go back through several of my streams where I talk about this extensively. Where we debunk things like Kramatorsk. And Kramatorsk, we had like 6 separate points alone. They said that the only way that a Toshka-U missile was fired and killed 52 people in the city of Kramatorsk would be the fact that the Ukrainians did it because the Russian Federation does not use the Toshka-U missile system, and neither does separatist forces within the LPR DPR. They said it was obsolete. That's coming from the ministry. That's coming from their Ministry of Defense for the Russian Federation. And we had on that video alone 6 separate points where the Russian Federation was bringing in Toshka-U systems clearly marked with their invasion markings into Gomel. They were being used in the other parts of the front. We'd seen them transported all over the place inside of Russia, inside of Belarus, and inside of Ukraine within the occupied territories. 6 separate instances alone on that one single event. And then after that, just recently in the past month, we've had several different images and videos come out where there have been that we've shown here where Russian Federation was using Toshka-U, some of them flying the Russian flag. They're talking about they were being discriminatory inside of Mariupol. Look at some of the stuff that IZ and RT has put out regarding propaganda during the Battle of Mariupol. The use of Grad systems. The Grad systems fire 120 millimeter Katyusha rockets. They fire them in 40 rocket salvos. They're not a precision munition. They're a dumbfire rocket. I know I've been at the wrong end of them when I was in the Baghdad embassy and the Kataib Hezbollah decided they wanted to shoot them at me. That was, like, they're dumbfire rockets. They're not accurate. They're not precision. They're meant for hitting an area and saturating it with munitions, which is why Kataib Hezbollah has a very difficult time of actually doing anything when they fire 6 rockets. It takes 40 rockets, not 6. But that's what I'm talking about. You look at this and you read this stuff, and if you were just in Russia, right? If you were in Russia, you didn't have access to this stuff, and you didn't see the other side of things, yeah, I would 100% be pro-Russian. Yeah, I'd kick their ass. I mean, but I'm not. You know, I'm a Westerner. I have the ability to go and I can read stuff from the Kremlin and from the Duma and their statements on social media and the representatives to the Geneva regarding the arms delegations and the Russian Federation to the United Nations and their statements. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating. It's very frustrating. And it angers me. And so Russia, there is no international laws Russia is going to uphold. There is no treaty that Russia will uphold. The only way that Russia is going to be, pacified, essentially, is with the complete destruction of their military inside of Ukraine, the complete destruction of separatist forces inside of Ukraine, and the retaking of Crimea. Like, that is what, and Moldova is taking over the autonomous region of Transnistria. That would probably pacify the Russian Federation. Also, Putin being kicked out of power and probably preferably executed by one of his officials. It's just, that's probably how it's going to go. Like, Russia has to lose everything. They have to lose everything. Like, it's It's unbelievably frustrating. And you don't see all of it here. There's so much stuff that they post. Rio probably posts at least 500 articles a day, I swear, on just their Twitter. And a lot of it's like Ukrainian shelled this city, Ukrainian shelled this city. And we do go through some of that stuff here, but it's most of the time I don't know if it actually has happened. You know, like they don't give a lot of footage. They give like the same photo of fragments being held up in their hand. They have the same like 6 stock photos that they got at some point earlier in the war, and they just keep reusing them over and over and over again. It's unbelievable, and nobody but Westerners would know that because no one has access to Twitter if you're in Russia, except for government agencies, most of which don't post. The Ministry of Defense for Russia hasn't posted since I think April 28th, April 26th. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is about the only active one. The Kremlin hasn't posted. Putin hasn't posted. No one else has posted anything. It's just official government agencies and ones that they actually care about. The Ministry of Internal Defense, or the Ministry of Defense, used to post stuff. They used to have a daily update every single day regarding the war. They stopped doing those in April. So, I mean, it's just unbelievable to read so much of this stuff. It's just unbelievable. But with that, I'm going to continue on with the news. We got one more point here inside of Ukraine, and that is actually up here, where the air base was actually hit by a Russian missile strike here in the country. This is the Kirovod region or oblast, and a air base was struck by missiles here just outside. We actually have that geolocated here for you. So this be the air base that was hit. Quote, Russian occupiers shelled the Kansanove air base and one of the local facilities of Ukrazalizhnitsia. I have no idea what that is, I'm sorry. In the Kirovod region on July 23rd, 1 serviceman and 2 employees of the departmental security guards of the transformer substation were killed. 13 more servicemen were injured, and that's coming from Andriy Reykjavich, who's the head of the Kirovod Regional Military Administration. And then he got an update later that was posted today. Rocket attacks in the Kirovod region on July 23rd. The number of victims has increased to 19. All of them have received qualified medical care. Once again, coming from Andriy Reykjavich. And we can see some of the destruction here. You can see the smoke rising up from the airbase. A blow to the Ukrainian Air Force, that's going to be for sure. The Ukrainian Air Force has been much more active now that they've received additional aircraft and parts and supplies and equipment to actually maintain and keep their jets in the fight. We've seen them very active in the front lines, and we know that they're having significant effects on that, as neither Russia nor Ukraine have any kind of air superiority within the region. It's one of the reasons why this war is being so difficult for either side. The lack of air superiority, especially since the development of air superiority in the 20th century, is paramount to victory on the ground. It's Ukrainian railways. Okay. That is what was hit, was a Ukrainian railway hub. Okay. Thank you very much, Riley. As we move into the rest of Europe, we jump over here where this is affecting all of Europe. Saudi Arabian oil is being pumped into Europe at astronomical levels. This is as a result of trying to diversify away from Russian gas supplies and oil supplies. Saudi Arabia has a huge company when it comes to oil. It's called Saudi Aramco. If you guys want to go check it out, there's a lot of stuff about them. But they have done a deal with the EU in order to continue, or in order to diversify, and so they're pumping a lot of oil here. Saudi Arabia has doubled its oil supplies to Europe in the last few weeks, replacing Russian oil in the market and the Kremlin control since the Soviet times. So In July, more than 1 million barrels a day, mostly from Saudi Arabia, entered the EU via the Sumed pipeline through Egypt. Another 1.2 million barrels per day were transported to European ports by tankers sailing through the Suez Canal. A total volume of Saudi supplies to Europe reached a record since April of 2020. Something that needs to be very importantly noted, and I didn't realize this until just now, is that Russia is planning to go to Egypt here shortly. They're planning on having some diplomatic adventures in Egypt. I can't imagine why. But we can take a look here. Yeah, that's pretty significant when it comes to oil. Jump down here into Geneva, where the WHO has declared a global health emergency over the monkeypox outbreak. A rapidly spreading monkeypox represents the global health emergency according to the WHO, which is currently the highest alert level. The WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said. He said that the risk of monkeypox, which spreads via close contact and tends to cause flu-like symptoms and pus-filled skin lesions, was moderate globally, except in Europe, where the WHO has deemed the risk as high. So far this year, there have been more than 16,000 cases of monkeypox in more than 75 countries and 5 deaths in Africa. We can take a look from the official statement from the WHO here. Oh, it's 53 minutes long, so I think we're not going to. If you would like to actually watch that, these maps, clear back to, I believe it's April the 11th, are all archived. So you can all go onto the website. It's under Our Works, and then you go into our maps, our daily maps, and we have sections for every month. And you guys can go and check it out. We even break it down to year because we plan on doing this for a long time to come. But you can go and watch, and you can read any of the reports or follow up with any of this stuff, especially if we have more info or the official publications or reports or anything. You guys can go back through these maps anytime you want and go back through them and take a look. Or you can watch them with the stream. I try and get them on the stream every single day. There's one point here in Russia which I almost missed. Sorry if I seem a little distracted today. It's been a little bit of a longer day. But over here in Tetkino is within 200 meters of the Ukrainian border with Russia. And a Russian military outpost has been shelled here in Tetkino, as best we can tell. If we have taken a look at it, it seems to be this one specifically. But we can take a look here at the situation there. So as you can see, very accurate artillery fire. This wouldn't require like M777s or anything. This is well within range. 152 batteries, the DPK-30s that they use. It looks like they're putting very accurate hits on target too. It seems to be actual artillery as opposed to like grad rockets or anything. So, but yes. So, no more Russian outpost. And that starts to bring us down here where we start to get into the Middle East. And the first thing we have is actually up here. This is over in Bashika, which is in northern part of Iraq, where pro-Iranian rockets hit Turkish positions within this area. This happened last night between the 22nd and 23rd today. Militants of the pro-Ukrainian group Lviva Al-Raq fired 14 rockets in the direction and located of Turkish armed forces in the Bashikra district. It is reported that one of them hit the target. There is still no information about the destruction and the number of casualties. According to the group, the shelling was for the revenge of killing civilians in the city of Zako, which occurred where 8 Arab tourists and 23 additional people, including several children, were injured by Turkish airstrikes up in Dahuk. You can see some of that here. This appears to be some of their rocket setups. I truly do mean when I say they don't need a whole lot. If you have some basic fabrication skills, you can build this. They build them on everything. Trucks, they build little stands like this. A lot of this allows them to just quickly shoot and move and get out of there before they receive any kind of counter battery or anything. But usually it's very simple setups. We jump over here to Erbil, where there are protests over water in this area. Water supplies and utilities have been exceptionally hit within Iraq. As we know, the Tigris has been has essentially all dried up, the Euphrates and the Tigris River here. But now protests are starting to occur in the major city of Erbil, Iraq, as a result. Yes. By the way, I know you can build this if you have basic fabrication skills. I don't recommend it. I'm sure your local government authorities would have something to say about this if you were to do that. Disclaimer: yeah, don't build rocket tubes. Don't put them on the back of your truck, even if it's just for fireworks. Don't be done with fireworks. 15,500 people in the United States alone last year had to go to the hospital for firework-related injuries. Don't be dumb. Be smart. Use common sense. Common sense is very common these days, but try nonetheless. Down here in Najaf, which is to the south of Baghdad, we can see where employment protests are ongoing. Protesters demanding employment burn down the gates of the deputy's house of the city here in Najaf. Believe it or not, I tried to learn Arabic when I was actually overseas, and it is probably one of the most difficult languages I have ever tried to learn in my life. Seriously, it is excruciating to try and learn it, but it's kind of cool. But yes. Anyway, off of that tangent, because I was just sitting here listening to him talk. But the current situation here in Iraq is pretty desperate. First of all, a lot of these oil facilities are run by foreign companies, whether you're talking about Kuwaiti, Bahrain, French, Saudi Arabian is definitely a big one. The UAE, a lot of these companies are run out of foreign companies, and they don't employ a lot of local workers. Most of the time, they bring in their own specialists to pump this oil. And on top of that, there's a very terrible situation in Iraq. The rivers have essentially dried up. There's an immense drought here in Iraq, and most of which rivers? The Euphrates and the Tigris. The Euphrates and the Tigris both run through Baghdad. This is actually the homeland of Mesopotamia because of that. Mesopotamia, for those that don't know, is the first known civilization on the planet. And so this is the Euphrates River right here. And it runs throughout central and southern Iraq, and it runs down here, and it runs all the way up into Syria. This right here is called the Middle Euphrates River Valley, or the MERV. And it runs from Al-Qaim, and it runs up to Lake Assad. That's the MERV, the Middle Euphrates River Valley. The other one that you have is the Tigris. Tigris River runs right through downtown Baghdad. It starts all the way over here on the border with Iran, and it flows all the way through Baghdad. It's actually the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad actually sits right here along the riverfront. Let's see if I can find it. So 14th July? I don't think so. Maybe. Embassy of Lebanon. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not gonna... Oh. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway. You'd think I'd know, considering I spent some time there. I'm looking for a specific bridge. Oh, there it is. 14th July Bridge, which means that the embassy complex is right over here. But, yeah. Anyway, so, but this is the Tigris River, and it's one of the two major rivers that run through Iraq. and the river is pretty much dried up. It's a combination of factors. One, there's a very severe drought within Iraq that has caused these two rivers to dry up. The other thing is pollution. One of the things that they used to teach us is, trash on the side of the road could indicate an IED, which is all dang well helpful when you're in the United States and they're training you for it. It's not very, very helpful when you actually get there, because there's trash everywhere. If you go down the sides of the roads, there's these giant bags of trash everywhere. There's entire 55-gallon drums sitting on the side of the road. Like, it's not the most pleasant places in the world, especially when you get out to the more rural areas. And a lot of this stuff, unfortunately, ends up at the rivers, so it causes things to clog up, which definitely doesn't help. And we've seen photos of that right here on the channel. So they have a pollution problem. They have a littering problem. They have a drought. That doesn't help. We've seen several major sandstorms hit Iraq. And we also know that at least 30% of some of these locations, including areas such as in the Diyala governorate, which is just here northeast of Baghdad, we know that is, they've lost a large amount of agricultural land. Roughly about 30% of agricultural land is destroyed as a result of the drought. So employment isn't expansive within these regions. And if you aren't working in a field or something in one of these more fertile areas, you're looking at either being a local shopkeeper, or you're probably going to be trying to find work with an oil facility, as there's so much oil in Iraq that sometimes you'll even find spots of it bubbling up on the side of the road. Iraq is filled with oil. It is a very oil-rich nation, but due to conflicts within this region and political instability, that resource, outside of foreign governments being able to come in and brokering deals with Iraq, haven't really been able to exploit those natural resources to the fullest potential, and therefore Iraq has remained economically in a kind of a digressive state. We jump over here into Afghanistan, where 2 Islamic State fighters were actually killed up here in Kamri, which is in the Baghlan province of Afghanistan. The Taliban conducted an operation against the Islamic State militants. During the battle, at least 3 security officials were killed, meaning the 3 Taliban members were killed. Several more were injured, and it is reported, though, that the losses may be much higher. The fact is that the Taliban do try to limit any kind of information leaving out of Afghanistan, even within local media, as they have tried to consolidate their power. And so it's possible that these are much higher. 2 of the Islamic State militants that were defending the building were also killed after they had used up all their ammunition. And so we jump down here into Africa, where the first thing we have is coming out of Bamako. Bamako yesterday had a very serious attack. Huh? 2 days ago, sorry. 2 days ago, Bamako had a very serious attack, and no one knew what had happened or who was behind the attacks. But the Al-Qaeda-linked group Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal-Muslim, which is also known as JNIM. It's an Al-Qaeda-linked group, and they claimed responsibility for the attack today regarding Mali. And they published photos of the attack, including of the 2 suicide bombers who used vehicle-borne IEDs that they detonated at the location of the military forces. And then they had a follow-on attack there. They said that in the statement that the reason for the attack was because of the cooperation between Mali authorities and the Russian PMC Wagner group. And there's that official statement claiming the attack. So the Wagner group, very interesting group indeed. The Wagner group is a private military corporation, or a PMC, technically. I say technically because the Wagner group is really an extension of the Russian military arm. What they are is basically you are a conscript. So there's mass conscription for the Russian military. Once you become a conscript, many of these conscripts, mostly being from poorer regions, sign up for the military because they really don't conscript very heavily in areas such as Moscow or St. Petersburg. From there, you serve a contract, and you're a contractual soldier. You're doing this voluntarily. You get follow-on training and all sorts of stuff, and you get a pension from the government. But you have another option after that, really, and that is the Wagners. The Wagner PMC Corps is paid very well. In fact, it's led by someone that is known as Putin's chef, quote unquote. But he is within Putin's inner circle. And what the Wagner Group does is they basically operate anywhere the Russian military is operating, and or in areas that the Russian military does not want or would like to operate but can't. And they conduct clandestine operations all over the world. A lot of them happen here in Africa, but there's some inside of other countries as well. For instance, in 2018, February 8th of 2018, the Wagner PMC Corps, as well as pro-Assad militia forces, attacked a U.S. outpost in the Omar oil fields of Syria on the northern side of the Euphrates River, which is the deconfliction line between the Russian forces and the American and coalition forces, one supporting Assad, one supporting the SDF, or the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is mostly made up of the YPG and YPJ. They conducted this operation, and the United States has a hotline in Syria with Russian forces in order to prevent, major wars breaking out. They called up on the hotline, are there any Russian troops on the northern side of the Euphrates River? Russia said no. So the United States, at that point in time, we stacked a massive amount of air power, and we bombed these guys for like 3.5 hours. We brought in everything. HIMARS, we used HIMARS against them. There was a QRF force that went out. I mean, it was a whole ordeal. And we killed and wounded 300 members of the Wagner Group, as well as about another 100 dead when it comes to the pro-Assad regime guys. And so then that's kind of the situation. And so that's kind of the situation with that, is what they are is their plausible deniability. The separatists in Ukraine fill that role. The Wagners are being called in for the Russians inside of Ukraine, really to make up for manpower losses in their standing military. But in places such as we've seen in Mali, where the Wagner PMC Corps is actually tried to stage, and the French caught them on drone footage staging a mass grave up in Mali, which we also had here on the channel, where they said that the French had massacred a bunch of civilians. They actually staged a massacre there, and they filled a mass grave with a bunch of people that they had killed. So that's the situation with the Wagner Group. Their whole purpose in life is plausible deniability. They're able to make the other countries look bad, and they're able to combat other countries in a much more active role with the Wagner PMC, and simply state they weren't under the control of Russian authorities. They're a private military corporation, meaning they're mercenaries. So that's the thing that's going on there. So that's what happened in Syria, and I can tell you that from personal experience, and that's what happens, that's what's happening all across the globe. So very interesting group of guys, and I can see why even JNIM doesn't like them, because I don't like them either. I just don't agree with a terrorist organization doing that. When we jump over here into North America, we have a couple of different developments. The first one is coming out of just north of Fresno and outside of Yosemite National Park. Very beautiful if you've never been there. I've been there, as has Riley. It's absolutely amazing. It's probably my favorite national park in the United States. But the fires are burning near Yosemite. The oak forests currently are burning just outside the national park. Over 600 hectares of land has already been burned down. The fire is approaching residential buildings at this point, and so far more than 12 have already been burned down. The nearest settlements at this point are being evacuated. Now, California is very used to widespread wildfires. You talk about like the wildfires up in Redlands, California, that made it look like it was the apocalypse or Call of Duty zombies in some cases, as I've seen several memes be done of it. But nonetheless, these are ravaging the landscape, and it's becoming extremely dangerous. There are hotshot crews there at this point. I've been pretty up close with wildfires. There was one that actually, the Apple Valley wildfire that occurred just over here. This is the Apple. Wait. Yeah, just over here. This is the Apple Valley. And there was a wildfire when I was out here in California. I used to live in this area. And so there was a pretty massive wildfire that happened there. They actually happened right along I-10. There's fires on both sides of I-10. It looked like the apocalypse. But it's pretty terrifying. It's very terrifying. If you've actually ever seen them for real and are up close with them, like it's a pretty scary thing. And these things burn immensely fast in some cases. The Yarnell fire at some points was moving a quarter mile a second with the wind gust that was going up. And that's where the Granite Mountain Hotshots, unfortunately, lost their lives, was at the Yarnell fire. And so that's kind of the situation with these. It's just kind of they're extremely dangerous, extremely hazardous. If you happen to live out in California in this area, I highly recommend you just evacuate to another location. They're very unpredictable. The weather has an immense amount of effect on them with the wind gusts and the dryness in the air. So I highly recommend storms developing and causing that air to rush. With those storm fronts definitely doesn't help, and we have seen an immense amount of storm fronts, at least in the Midwest, over the last few days. So hopefully there aren't too many that develop on the coast. Jump over here, kind of in the center of the country, where as a result of many of these mass shootings that have occurred at schools within the United States, there have been several developments. We were talking about bulletproof backpacks before. Now we're seeing bulletproof desks, as is created by a Tennessee-based First Line Furniture Company. They teamed up with creators of ballistic tables that aims at distributing them to schools in order to protect students from shootings. So this comes as renewed calls for tougher gun control laws within the United States are back up on the table once again in the debates, and we're also seeing a major development within the industry of child school shooting related things. Once again, bulletproof backpacks, back to school sales with like plates, like armor plate, like the stuff I carried, like just crazy stuff. Clear backpacks, and this stuff as well, unfortunately. The fact that you would have to consider this is crazy. And yes, you can go and you can purchase them. This is their website here. Jump down into Cuba, and specifically here in Havana, where Cuba is getting ready to hold a referendum regarding same-sex marriage. Cuba will hold the referendum is scheduled to take place on September the 25th. And if you would like to read more about that, you can go ahead and check in there at Reuters.com. But that starts to bring us into the interesting topics regarding the news today. And the first thing we have is over here in Turkey. Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, may have been discovered here in the Van province. However, researchers not associated with the research urged caution in saying this, saying much more information is needed before the structure can be tied to the Khan family. Historical records mention a palace in the summer capital in the region, but don't specify exactly where. Excavations of the palace is ongoing at this point, but it appears to have been heavily looted. Though, despite the looting, the team has found the remains of glazed roof tiles, bricks, tricolored glazed ceramic potteries, and porcelain. An important find is that some of the roof tiles have an S-like symbol on the roof-ending tiles, known as the svastika pattern or Tamga. And this is one of the power symbols of the Mongol Khans. Many scholars have expressed similar views. The discovery is exciting, but more information is still needed. The research of the site is currently being conducted by a joint Turkish-Mongolian team. Report regarding the research will be released within the next few months. But if you want to read more regarding that, you guys can check it out. It's over on Live Science. And as we jump over here into Beijing, so this is a genetically modified rice coming from the Wenbin Zhao of the Chinese Academy it's coming from a plant biologist named Wabin Zhao of the Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences, or CAS, which cloned through 118 rice and maize regulatory genes, and the other researchers have previously identified as likely important in photosynthesis. Basically, his team went through, found out which ones were to activate if they were to grow in low nitrogen soil, and allowed for these boosts to uptake on the nutrient. Basically, they need less nitrogen-rich soil in order to grow, and they will grow more when they do. We found 13 genes that turned on the rice plants that are able to grow in nitrogen-poor soil. 5 led to a fourfold or greater boost in nitrogen uptake. And this means that one of these genes, the rice variety called Nippon bear, that was used for research, it also located a gene in other individual rice plants. Basically, what this means is they can produce up to 40% more grain per plot than if they were left alone. So they're genetically modifying the rice. They can produce 40% more grain, more rice per plot than if they were to be unmodified, which solves a lot of things. Rice can be planted in very large quantities. Now they have more options to grow them in if they can be grown in basically nitrogen poor environments. And that also, if they produce more, that's more food, that's more a lot of things. So that's going to help with, we can now export, there's more rice that could be exported to other places in the world. Somalia, Ethiopia, anywhere with need in Africa, much like the grain situation when it comes to Ukraine, helping to alleviate global hunger is always going to be a challenge, and this is a way to do it. But with that, that's actually all of the news for the day. There's a lot of stuff that's been happening today, quite a bit indeed, and a lot of interesting developments when it comes to Ukraine, interesting developments with protests in Iraq. You also have pro-Iranian militias firing on Turkish forces there. Turkey's doing controversial things in Iraq, unsurprisingly. And of course, we have some really neat news regarding, Genghis Khan's grandson's palace. Did you know that nearly 10% of the world can actually trace his roots back to Genghis Khan? The man had that many children. It's insane. A very, very productive man. Anyway, with that is everything in the news today. I hope that you guys have enjoyed. I am sorry if I had a few tangents there. And I'm sorry for any technical difficulties that happened today. I mean, it's unfortunately a reality. We're doing this live, so... But I hope that you still enjoyed, you found it knowledgeable, and I hope that you guys will be returning with us. The main point of this project, though, is to make sure that we are providing some help to the people that are affected by the very news that we're talking about on this channel every day. We're never pushing any kind of super chats, and we're never doing any kind of merchandising here. 100% of everything we do is for charities. So please check out that video description below, and please check out all of those charities, not just for Ukraine, but for other locations as well. They don't get the highlight and the love that they really should, and there's millions of people affected by this. 47 million people alone are affected just because of the Ukraine crisis as a result of hunger and famine. And that's according to the World Food Program, which is run by the UN. So I hope that you guys will check that out. If you have any more organizations, please reach out to a member on the Discord and let us know what those organizations are. Any of the staff members on the Discord will be more than happy to take your information and send it up to people like me, and we'll start that vetting process and hopefully get that thing going for you guys. And hopefully we can add that to the stream and the website and everything else as well. Well, other than that, if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's fine. As cheesy as it sounds, give us a like and subscribe. The more people that see this and the more people that come here and enjoy the news with us and ask questions that I hopefully would be able to answer in a meaningful way, then the more people overall joining the community there would be to make a lot more difference, a much bigger difference in really helping people throughout the world. supporting these organizations, doing fundraisers on this channel directly by adding them directly to the streams themselves. That's what we want to do here. Thank you for supporting us in that endeavor, and thank you for supporting those organizations going forward. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign up for the night. Hopefully you'll join us back once again tomorrow at 9 p.m. Central Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. And I hope that you guys will be back here once again for another 24 hours of news and review. My name is Paul, and thank you for watching the New News. Have a fantastic rest of your night.